Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and public. The meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but I've had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. May I also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? And please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking, and please don't interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Okay, thank you. So, moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, welcome and apologies. Jay, do we have any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. I haven't received any apologies for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members, do you have any declarations with regards to the item we are scrutinising today, please? No, none declared. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting the 16th of January 25. Members, a reminder that these are the minutes of the meeting of the previous meeting where the committee scrutinised Safer Torfaen Community Safety Partnership. Could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If you don't, I will take them as agreed. Okay, thank you very much. So we take that as agreed. Agenda item 4, which is the action sheet. If I could ask Rebecca, please, to run through that.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, you'll see there were a number of actions outstanding from 3 meetings listed on the action sheet. So they have all now the information that you requested being emailed to members last week, and you've also received the responses to the recommendations from the last meeting. So I have nothing further, Chair, unless members have any issues with any of the information they were sent.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth. Agenda item 5, addressing the housing crisis. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome Councillor David Daniels, who is Executive Member for Adults and Housing, Simon Rose, who is the Group Manager for Housing and Commissioning, and Rachel Lewis, Commissioning Manager. Welcome also to the officers who are observing today's meeting. On behalf of the committee, I would like to express our thanks to Simon and the WALIC for hosting a visit to Pearl House last week. It was fantastic to see the development, and it was a really informative visit prior to this afternoon's meeting. So, once again, thank you very much. Also, our thanks go to the members of the public who have submitted comments prior to this meeting for our consideration when formulating questions. Members have all read the report, and we've developed a suite of questions, so I propose we head straight into the questioning. Thank you. Right, okay, so question number 1 is myself. The relevant paragraph 3.11, it's about the county plan objectives. With all 9 county plan objectives being interrelated and secure, sustainable housing has such an impact on people's lives, such as educational attainment, health outcomes, etc. Is addressing the housing crisis suitably prioritised?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think in terms of the level of intricacies of county plan, it covers a plethora of issues that we need to address across the whole spectrum of difficulties that our residents face. Housing, I think, is central, and you're quite right to point out that it's a pivotal part in people's lives. Without a home, individuals can't thrive, attain the level of achievements that they wish to do, and actually then develop the communities around them. So it's essential that we get that right. I think in terms of the level of priority that's in the county plan, yes, I think it's got a significant part in there. I think housing is integral in terms of several other agendas that are referenced in the plan there around social care, around health, well-being. I think in terms of where those all link in, you'll find housing either linked to it, core to it, or running alongside parallel to it. I think it's one of those things that you can't get away from. It's things that a lot of us sat around the table here probably take for granted at homes. There's a lot of individuals that haven't got that facility, haven't got that security, that stability, and we're able then to actually attain our full potential. So it is essential, it's a cornerstone, and I do think within the county plan we've got the balance quite right at this point. I think the thing is that as the market shifts and changes, and as demand changes, we'll see that we'll need to make alternative decisions around how we're prioritising housing within that and how we actually shift that balance and need. A lot, though, is driven, as is referenced in the report, by policies that are from central government, also Welsh Government, and also economic factors that are not within our gift and control. So we have to take that into account when we're looking at housing in terms of that. But I do think in order to answer the question, come back to that point, is yes, I think it is suitably prioritised in that plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 2, I invite Councillor David Williams, please.
So, thank you, Chair. So also on 311, and the latter point there, we'll bring new private and affordable housing to market through working with landowners to identify new parcels of land for housing. It's really, my question is, how are you addressing this, given we don't have lots of land in Torfaen? And do you have any examples where that approach has been successful?
This is a real challenge, Councillor. We know the land supply in Torfaen is really shot, for want of a better phrase. We have very little land left in the council's ownership, if any. There's a lot of public sector land out there, but it's very much how do we work with those partners, such as health, police, Welsh Government as well, in terms of land that they hold in the area, and how we use that. What we're doing through the Strategic Housing Partnership is mapping all that available land. We're looking at what's available, what's been brought forward before in terms of opportunities that have probably been set aside because they've been in that, what I would call that too hard to do box, to coin a phrase, that at the point it was brought forward, those schemes weren't deemed viable. It's whether we can unlock the viability through other mechanisms and other channels that we've got. So we're doing a piece of work there that's looking at the different opportunities and the different sites that are available, not just in public ownership, but also private ownership. So we're looking at the parcels of land there that are literally being able to be brought forward. Now, there is potential for us to unlock a number of smaller sites in that. The larger sites and the volume at which we need housing is the problem for Torfaen because we don't have that huge land bank. At this stage, what I would say is there's no real tangible output to a number of those, although what I would point to is that we are going out on the open market and purchasing accommodation which is available and is providing affordable housing solutions for individuals. So over the course of the last year, I think around about 20 units have been brought back into use by purchasing properties on the open market, which have been former council-owned properties that have gone into the ownership potentially of Bronavon, but also other properties on the open market that are there. So we've been as creative as we can with the social housing grant programme that we've got. And in the report, you'll see reference to us almost fully committing this year the full amount that we've had. So I think to answer the question in one sense, we're doing certain activities that are identifying those lands and looking at how we unlock those opportunities. And we've got the right people around the table to make that happen. What we need to do is try and prioritise those sites now in terms of unlocking the viability. There will be a number that won't be viable going forward. There will be a number that will be potentially viable. There'll be some that will be, yes, we need to go on these and really quickly. But again, it comes back to how we approach that as a partnership, and it has to be a partnership, because if we're doing that in our own pockets and in our silos, we're going to get it wrong. So that's why the Strategic Housing Partnership, as referenced in the report, is absolutely critical to that very I'll put my teeth in now, that very question that you raised.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 3, I invite Councillor David Thomas, please.
Thanks, Chair. Section 3.2 sets out the drivers affecting the housing market. Does evidence or data show us that drivers are consistent across the borough, or are certain drivers more prevalent or demand for service hire in specific areas?
Okay, I think, Councillor, thank you for that question. It's really insightful. That there are some differences in terms of demand and supply in the different parts of the borough. I would say that in the south part of the borough, there's a significantly higher level of demand that we have for accommodation and our services. I can't give the percentages in terms of how that works out, but I can give some context around that in terms of some of the drivers that are referenced there, in terms of the transport links, the development of the Grange Hospital. We've seen a hotbed in Cwmbran in terms of rental prices rising significantly. It's filtered up the valley now towards Pontypool and then rising again now. And that's that transient effect in terms of people making then choices around what they can then access. So we do see that disparity in the area. We do see the differences, particularly around house prices and rental prices varying. The gap is closing, though, I have to say, that some of the rents that we're seeing recently in sort of the upper part of the valley up towards Pontypool and higher, we are seeing almost comparable to some of the rents that are in Cwmbran. So the differential isn't that great now. What I would say in terms of the number of presentations that we're receiving for assistance for securing affordable housing through the housing register, the predominant demand is in the south of the borough, where the larger population is. The presentations around homelessness, again, predominant demand in the south of the borough again. I would have a very educated guess at that being a sort of 60–65% number towards the south of the borough, which would be the Cwmbran area, and the remaining level of applications coming around about 35% in the mid to north area of the borough. So there is a predominant pressure on the south of the borough in terms of provision, and it's particularly difficult for us to source affordable accommodation for individuals outside of the social rented market in those areas. The private rented sector in Torfaen has diminished significantly in recent years, and that's driving up a number of the costs that we're seeing in terms of the private rented market, but also the general housing market and house prices. And that we're noticing that that's picking up again, the housing market. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, very, very informative. Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, thank you. More on to question 4. I invite Councillor Nick Hawler, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to everybody. With the Severn Bridges tolls being removed a few years ago, have we seen an increase of people moving into the borough, and what impact has this done on local housing market, consequently the social housing?
Okay, it's a really good question, Councillor, and I go back to the last point that Councillor Thomas made around the differentials in the housing market. One of the drivers, and it's difficult for me to pinpoint accurate data in terms of the inward migration that we've seen in terms of plotting who's been buying accommodation in the county borough in the south of the area. What we have seen, though, is the effect on the house prices, and that happened at, I would say, it was even pre the actual tolls being lifted, that it was as soon as there was an announcement that the tolls were going to be lifted in X amount of time, that there was a flurry of activities across private landlords and investors in securing accommodation across that, what I call, and what they called actually, and I've picked up on that quote from them, a golden corridor, which is a postcode at the bottom of Newport, the MP19 postcode, where the M4 cuts, and upwards towards Cwmbran, where it was a hotbed of property investment and development, and it drove the housing market. So as soon as that notice was given that the tolls were going to be lifted, people saw that there was an opportunity to invest in accommodation and that it would be a wise investment. And those individuals that at the time I was working at in the different borough were very, very keen to be purchasing accommodation and utilising accommodation in certain postcode areas. And that's a very business-orientated approach from those property investors. I have to say it was common sense when you look at it and when you think about it, because it has driven up the property values there, and they've been able to make a significant amount of money from the actions that they've undertaken in that area. What I would say is that in terms of what that's driven for ourselves is that rise in house prices, that rise in property rental values, and also the lowering of availability of affordable accommodation that's driven up our demand. Because of then the issues that we've highlighted earlier around land supply, we've not been able to replace that with affordable housing options to the degree that we needed. So we've had to be creative with what we've done. And I think we've done a number of things to try and mitigate against that. You then look to things such as the Grange Hospital opening and the activity there around property values, the interest in that area, approaches that I've had myself from staff seeking accommodation who work in the health authority, and from the health authority themselves looking for accommodation for staff in the area so that they're close to that hospital. It was inevitable that that would have a driving factor around housing, and then the availability of affordable housing for residents of Torvine. It does bring opportunities, though, I have to say, because it brings employment with it. And that's desperately needed as well. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it, in terms of developing the economy and sustaining the availability of that affordable accommodation for residents in the communities that we're serving. So it's a really difficult one, but we've certainly seen that shift in house prices. The evidence around the volume of migration is difficult to equate. In terms of access for social housing, the way in which we allocate social housing, we're able to prioritise that first and foremost for individuals who have a connection to Torvine. So what I would say is the affordable housing solutions that we have are for the residents of Torvine, people who have got a connection here in some way, shape or form. So we do lock that in. So that hopefully will give some reassurance that we're using our available affordable assets in the best possible manner to meet the need that we have.
Thank you, Simon. I tend to agree with your comments. We have seen a dramatic change of prices, even in Blenavon, over the period of time since the bridge is closed. But I've got a fear that prices are becoming, in some areas, are getting inaccessible for local people that potentially could put them into the situations that we talk about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horler. Councillor Daniels?
Yeah, I'll try not to talk for too long. So I think this goes to basically show that housing is not just a Torvine issue. It's not even just a Wales-wide issue. It's an England, it's a whole of UK issue, because the bridge is one such factor. They were talking about the Grange is another factor, but I mean the overwhelming factor is that house prices across the UK are going up significantly and rents are going up significantly. So people are moving from areas where it's just becoming unaffordable for them to comparatively more affordable places like ours, which is unfortunately driving up those private rents and driving up those private house prices, of which we don't have a lot of control over. But inevitably, it means that more and more people are falling out of being able to afford to buy and privately rent, and into socially rented as their only option. So I think it's the interlinked kind of element, I think, is the real kind of thing to focus on, rather than individual things like the bridge, because it's why we really need a UK-wide resolution.
We're not talking too long, then just start rabbling on.
It's why I think you need to... Sorry, Dave, I think your mic was on at the time.
Councillor Thomas, your mic is on.
Yeah, it is on, yeah, sorry about that. I was having a little chat with a person in the room, yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. So yeah, I've lost my point, but it was essentially that it needs a UK-wide resolution, really. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Daniels. Question 5, I'll invite Councillor David Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is at 3.3, so about policy directions. So how significantly have the policy directions, such as the release of offenders, referenced refugee settlement, not referenced, but anything like that. And others had specifically on demand for housing in Torvine. And I guess it's trying to understand a little bit in terms of some of the numbers and pressures.
Okay, again, a really good question, and it's one that it's not difficult to answer, but it's difficult to answer in short term. The pressure that we're seeing at the moment in terms of accommodation and the drive from other public sector agencies in terms of the early release of offenders, the short recall nature of individuals who are going back into custody, is driving a cycle there that is difficult for us to manage. Individuals are coming out with very high needs, difficult behaviour patterns that we're trying to manage, and the onus is left very much so on local authorities to try and manage that. I have to say that this is not, it's not uncommon, it's not something that's just happened, it has happened over time. But the way in which the individuals are coming out of custody and back into society, and the way in which that's managed, there's been a manifestations of a lack of investment in terms of other services over a protracted period of time. What I would point to is I've worked in housing for probably over 30 years. And in the 30 years, a predominant number of those have been spent in Wales. I have not, in that time, I have seen one prison built and a significant increase in population. I have not seen an additional approved premises built, a traditional bail hostel, if you like, built in Wales over that period. Now, that is a reflection of the policy direction from another agency that's then impacting on the local authority, because we're then having to accommodate a number of individuals who would, I feel, benefit from a more structured release plan, where they're getting more structured support in a more structured environment that enables those individuals to have the best opportunity of success. Putting an individual out into the community from serving a period of time in custody, no matter how long that duration, comes with significant pitfalls and problems. Because individuals have potentially been institutionalised, don't have the skills. It could have been, it could have a number of factors that need to be dealt with, such as around their mental health, substance misuse issues, that whilst the community can wrap support around, it's not done in a manner and it's not done in a way that's transferring individuals slowly back into the community. It's almost like a big bang. And that's obviously destined to fail, in my view. And that's a policy direction that's been there for years. The fact of moving individuals through sooner and quicker because the sentence durations are now shorter is just adding to that complexity now, with individuals coming to us much more speedily and in quite a high volume. The issues around migration and resettlement of asylum seekers, we're not a resettlement area at the moment in Torvine. We do assist. We've got individuals from, obviously, the war in Ukraine, a number of families from Syria that we've assisted and we continue to assist. The volume we've got and not causing any significant issues at this particular time. We've managed that programme exceptionally well through the mechanisms we set in, the partnerships we've got with private landlords, our RSLs, and how we've been able to make best use of the funding that's been made available to us from the Home Office to assist those individuals. So we've managed it as best we can, but those policy drivers from those areas do have a significant impact on how we work and how things change and how we manage the volume and complexity of individuals coming through. What I would point out as well is one of the biggest areas of concern for us is single person accommodation, and the bulk of individuals that we're dealing with, that we have in temporary accommodation at this particular point in time, are single people, will have a significant number of complex issues associated with them, will have a vast number, will have a level of offending behaviour, either significantly high or low level offending. There will be some issues there that we need to address. What we haven't got is sufficient infrastructure, sufficient supported accommodation provisions, alternative provisions there to help a number of those individuals. This is why Pearl House is critical in terms of what we've been trying to achieve and do in terms of providing that support.
Okay, thank you. More on the next set of questions, which is the Strategic Housing Partnership, and I'd like to invite again Councillor David Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Strategic Housing Partnership is a Torvine initiative, if I'm right, Simon. But what work is undertaken regionally at a strategic level? How do we connect up in terms of our approach?
Our approach regionally is done, I guess, through the RPB. There's a lot of work at the RPB, and housing sits core within that. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of work that's undertaken there. We have as well a health, housing and social care group that meet on a regular basis and undertake a number of activities in this area to address the issues around housing supply, looking at those wider issues that connect in with health and taking the opportunities to draw in different streams of funding to develop different initiatives. So one example that Torvine have benefited from in recent years has been around Tŷ Glas y Dolmen in Cwmbran, which is the old Kingfisher pub, which was renovated and pulled back together to create a re-ablement facility for the county borough that significantly helped the adult social care division in terms of re-ablement. Other examples have been there in terms of the different ICF fundings that have been brought in over time, in terms of accommodation up towards the Blanavon area. I think it was Lion Court. So there's a lot of regional activity going on. There's a lot of activity that goes on in terms of the space around housing support grants and connections, in terms of looking at opportunities to deliver things in partnership. So we've got a number of regional schemes that operate, with a number of regional services that have been developed. We've got as well regional opportunities that we've taken forward in partnership with a number of agencies, such as the recent lottery funding that we received for the programme that's delivered by the Woolwich, which is around creating some social inclusion activity and bringing forward peer support and employment opportunities for people faced with homelessness. And that's funded for, I think, a further 3 years now, and is proving quite effective in changing people's lives. A number of opportunities are being delivered and driven there in terms of getting individuals who've experienced homelessness into employment. So a number of people have gone into support work and are now working with individuals where they in the past would have been supported. And for me, that's a significant untapped resource for us to work with, because I don't think anybody's more equipped than somebody who's experienced homelessness than to support somebody who's going through homelessness. And that's the ethos of that service that we were able to get funding from on a regional basis from the National Lottery some time ago. There's a lot of activity in that area. I would say that what we haven't got is the level of strength of partnership that we have locally through the Strategic Housing Partnership. That's extremely difficult to replicate on a regional level because the needs are slightly different in different areas. When you look at Newport, for example, they've got a range of needs that go far beyond what we have. You touched earlier in a question, Councillor, around migration, asylum seekers and resettlement. They're a resettlement area in Newport. Their needs and diversity levels are much more complex than ours here. So it doesn't necessarily tie in, and there's a little bit of competition then. One thing I would say is that the driver for us is to look at the local need, the local issues as a primary factor. The outshoots then could be some regional work in that's involved, and that's there in terms of some of those partnerships with the project with the Woolwich and other partner agencies.
Okay, Councillor Daniels.
Yeah, just to supplement that. I mean, the RPB, I think there's a lot more regional work that could be done there, because I think that obviously the RPB, the emphasis is on health and social care, and I think that is where predominantly the focus is, understandably. But when we do talk about housing, it's about specialised needs rather than general needs, and I think it's the elephant in the room that housing really plays a massive part in those outcomes with health and social care. You know, it can make things better or worse. If you're being discharged from hospital, for example, living with a particular illness, mental health, it really does help or hinder just about anything you can think of. And it's prevalent, as was mentioned earlier. It's one of those things you don't think about until you have to think about it. So I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, I think, in terms of collaboration on an RPB level, in earnest as well, because that body actually has as has been described, a pot of money that comes with it. So it can actually tangibly do things. I think there is plenty more. I think it's one of those things where the answer is always, we can do more, because I think it is the case. I have had conversations with colleagues from other local authorities around collaboration, positing the idea that, some local authorities have more land than we do. We potentially might have more social housing grant than we know what to do with in the future. So I have been positing those questions to colleagues, and the problem with that is it's based on relationships that I have, and perhaps that needs to be more formalised as a conversation. So I will go away to the WLG, I think, and talk about whether there's potential for a regional get-together of colleagues, because we have a national get-together of colleagues to talk about strategic issues. And I think there is a case to be made for them to facilitate a better regional model of working together, I think. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you. We're to question 7. Invite Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at 4.2, the Strategic Housing Partnership, it explains in the report that there's a range of areas. There's continued progress and work, and it's currently under review and being revised. So, quite a straightforward question. What's the timeline on that? Because that seems to be a vital piece of work for us to be able to sort of go forward plan, and when we'll be able to sort of scrutinise that.
It is an easy question. The draft plan is done, so the action plan is done. What we have done, we've slimmed this down significantly to focus on some key areas and key activities. So we've slimmed down the number of themes that we have from 5 to 3. So we're focusing on the supply of accommodation as one theme. So we're looking at the development opportunities and the existing accommodation that is there across the sector, not just the social rented sector, but the private sector as well. We're then looking at the activities around homelessness and support and the prevention of homelessness and the activities there. And then the third area is around the community role and the community work in line with the Council's community wellbeing strategy and the changes towards an early intervention and prevention approach. So very much those 3 strands are seen as interlinked, critical and crucial. What we've developed is activities within that focus on those themes and draw back to common areas that we can track the progress. So the best example I can give is if we're working with our RSL partners, we're monitoring the effectiveness of how we're working in partnership to address debt. So we have collected information from RSL partners over a period of time now to show the track of the debt that's owed by their tenants. Okay. What we're able to track then at this point, and we've got this data is showing that is actually slowly dropping now, the debt that's held, which is a real positive. What we are seeing, though, with conversely, on the other side of the foot, is an average debt level that CAB colleagues are seeing on cases that are presented to CAB, and we're seeing that that's rising slightly. Now, what that tells us is that if debt is dropping in social rented tenancies from just a renter rate perspective, we're seeing a tangible increase elsewhere. And that tangible increase, when we get in underneath the skin of it, is down to 2 critical things. We're seeing mortgage arrears rising. We're seeing rent arrears rising in the private rented sector. We're seeing the pressure there now and the bubble bursting, where people have been able to sustain the position of those higher mortgage rates for a period of time. And that's something that was teased out in a meeting I was at yesterday, and a colleague from CAB said we're seeing a marked increase in the numbers coming through. So we're able to track these trends in there, and we're able to track a number of other things. So what we've been quite clear on is putting a suite of activities to get together that are interlinked and intertwined, that we can see the cause and effect, and we can see where things may well not be working, and we need to address them quicker, and that we've got collective information that we're then sharing. We've slimmed the plan down quite significantly to 3 pages. So it's easier to follow, it's easier to put the iteration together, and it's easier to review. the previous plan had a lot of activity in it. It was about 15, 20 pages long. It was workable, and we could see the tangible outputs there, we could see the impact we were having, but it wasn't as easy to demonstrate. And what we've done, we've gone away, reviewed it, refreshed it. We have a meeting next week of the Strategic Housing Partnership, and we're hopeful of endorsing that and then being able to bring that back for scrutiny at a later stage.
That's great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Move to question 8. Councillor David Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sticking with 4.2, this will incorporate a range of revised and refreshed measures to evidence the effectiveness of the activities undertaken and to identify trends that the partnership needs to address. How will this plan be monitored, impact and measured, and by who?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think the first things first, I've just mentioned that one of the things there was we will be bringing this into the scrutiny arena for yourselves to review, so that you can see that impact in terms of what's been delivered. I'd be really keen to share that with you, because we're really excited by what we've put together there. There's a lot of activities that are much easier to show and demonstrate, and then link the impact in terms of what the change has been, what the change activity has been. For the very example I gave earlier around that rent level debt, in terms of the work we've done with housing associations to target individuals who are facing financial issue in social rented accommodation, it's been a long-standing piece of work that's been done over the last, I'd say, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, that we've invested a lot of time, effort and energy to get early notifications in to ourselves and our financial inclusion service and our housing service, so that we can go out and engage with individuals. So we've got that evidence now that there's an impact there on the social rented sector. What we're able to then show is that very trend there. So we're really keen to bring this back to yourselves as scrutiny members, to actually look at how we've been at tackling those real live issues that are out there. Some of these are longer term measures, I have to say, within the plan. Others are more, what I would say, things we can quickly evidence and show some change on. So in terms of some of the supply issues, some of the measures that we're looking to actually speed up some of our processes, how we've changed some of our methodology. So, for example, around the resettlement of individuals from supported and temporary housing, our rates in terms of that have actually reduced significantly over recent years, and are managing at a very quite low level, particularly when you compare to other areas. But certainly from our perspective, the way we've changed our structures and our approaches has helped with some of that work. So we'll be able to bring that back to you to scrutinise in more detail. And I'd hope that will give you some reassurance, really, that that's live, active, and something that will be easy to articulate to you all, and you can really get your teeth into some of that scrutiny activity in that area.
Okay, thank you. Move on to question 9. Invite Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think you covered some of this already, Simon, but I will go back to 4.2. The measures will include activities around the supply of housing, the demand and delivery of housing, the rent arrear levels, which you just spoke about, the debt owed by residents across Torfaen, the delays in hospital discharge, and other measures that seek to identify the key drivers around housing demand. Now, the question I want to add is, which you just spoke a little bit about it, what current measures are used? Have we reviewed which measures are most insightful? And those measures that don't bring forward useful information? So if you don't bring any useful information, how will we know what's working and what's not?
Yeah, thank you. It does point to the last question in a way, Councillor, that we are collecting a range of information in there. A number that you mentioned there, the one interesting one is around the delayed transfer of care, and it's a critical one for us, because the numbers that we're faced with at times they fluctuate over time. It's not as if we can have accommodation left empty waiting for that instance to arise, but what we're trying to do is build some fluidity in our provision that we have. So all the measures that you touched on there are in the plan that we're looking at. And there are more. We're looking at the homeless levels, the numbers there, the numbers on the housing register, the number of void properties that RSLs have at a point in time, the level of time it takes our RSL partners to actually turn those properties around when they become void. Because, for example, if, say, Melin Homes have an empty property and it takes them 6 months to actually get that ready, the net impact on that is somebody's going to be waiting potentially in supported housing or temporary accommodation for a longer period of time. So we're drawing those strands together. We'd already done all this. This was all there. What we're doing it in a more pictorial format that's easy to follow and read. And members of Strategic Housing Partnership and the agencies there can actually buy into that. We're also bringing in data from social care, from health, and from other quarters. So it's not just housing or council data. This is data across the partnership so that we can have a true partnership and actually get some true impact for those key issues that we're seeing. Does that answer the query that you raised, Councillor?
Yeah, it did, yeah. Like I said, there was a lot in that particular statement. Would you like me to carry on to the next question, Chair? Because I'm down for the next one.
Yeah, well, moving off the strategy now, we've got couple of questions, or 3 questions on Pearl House, and the first of those questions was asked by you, Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you for that, Chair. I think we discussed it on the visit. Could you briefly set out the reasons behind the delay in opening Pearl House? And when are the first residents likely to be moving in? Because other people won't know, look, so that's why I'm asking that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. There's been a number of delays in Pearl House. I mean, the development itself was held up for a short period of time. There was a number of issues then around finalising some of the contractual details between the provider, Woolwich, and Melin as the landlord. And then there are some ongoing delays due to the legal arrangements around the commercial units on the ground floor of the building between the council and Melin Homes. That is likely to be finalised at the end of this month, and provided that runs along without any hiccups, which I'm hoping isn't going to arise, we should have the first residents moving in or around the 2nd week of March. Now, the phasing of that will be done over a 2-week period. We've already got individuals who are out in the community highlighted, ready to go into the units of accommodation. The individuals who will be working at Pearl House, the staff there, are already out in the community working with those individuals, building relationships, working through some of their support needs that they have, and actually getting them engaged in other activities and pursuits that will be part of the resettlement process once individuals go in. So we're already working with those individuals there. Pretty much all the rooms, I'm looking to Rachel now just to confirm, I think all the rooms are now provisionally allocated, subject to individual circumstances changes. So we already know the names of individuals and the details as to what we're doing with them, and already working on that arrangements around further move on, so that we've got some throughput in the scheme going forward from day one. I think that covers what we discussed when we did the visit, but welcome any other questions on there for those who weren't present.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I can see a hand up, Councillor Gaynor James.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to comment on the visit to Pearl House. It was just absolutely fantastic. It's an amazing place to put these the homeless people in. The accommodation was absolutely amazing. And speaking to the ladies from the Woolwich, I'm going to be visiting them next week and hoping I can help out in some way. But it's what an absolutely amazing organisation, and I just want to say thank you for it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor James, for that. And move on to question 11. Invite Councillor Linda Clarkson back in, please.
Thank you, Chair. There are sort of 3 parts to my next question, just to make, but they are quite straightforward. So the first one is, are we taking out of borough referrals for the Pearl House services?
A very easy answer, no.
Great. I thought that's where I'm after, small, short answers. Next is, are there any risks regarding funding for the support staff going forward?
We have funding in place for the support service there. That was commissioned fairly recently, and it covers the full costs for the service. As with anything related to housing support grant, it is a grant. It is something that is not guaranteed, but we are very adept, and I have to give credit to Rachel, who sat at my right-hand side here, and the team who've managed that grant programme over the years. We are extremely adept at managing that budget to the penny, but also being extremely flexible with it. We're going through a process at the moment with our providers to look at their costs for next year in terms of additionality. So there's always a rising cost because of, particularly with supported housing projects, because of the rise in electricity and other running costs and associated costs, and rises with meeting the real living wage. So the additionality that we've had this year, we've worked with providers to look at what those are and apportion that according to the costs that they can evidence to us. So we're not giving a flat rate rise to individuals, because we think that's wrong. There will be agencies that have got capacity within services to cover costs. So what we've done is we've scrutinised, we've challenged, and we're making best use of the funding that we have to make sure that agencies that we're working with, such as the Woolwich and the other support organisations, remain solvent and deliver the right services to people.
That's great, thanks. And the last part of the question you partially answered. It's sort of timescales and intention for review of the new service. How is that going to be managed?
The service is going to be under constant review. We're acutely aware as a department that this has to work. We're going to be integral to that. It is the Woolwich service. The Woolwich are responsible for running it, but we will be in the background working hard with the Woolwich to make sure that any barriers that come up against are dealt with and addressed. We'll be supporting them every step of the way, as will other organisations that are there. This is a true partnership approach. Mellin will be there as well. Mellin are retaining interest in the property as a landlord as part of the arrangements. So there's vested interest on several fronts here. And the way the linkages are being developed, we're working with a range of other organisations to come forward to have a management board that will actually oversee the running of the project and its effectiveness. We're very keen to make this part and parcel and core, really, to how we tackle homelessness in the borough and meet the objectives that Welsh Government are setting around making homelessness rare, brief and unrepeated. Our approach and rapid rehousing is firmly embedded in Pearl House and the things that we're building out from that.
Okay, thank you. We've got one further question on Pearl House, and that's a question for Councillor David Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I realise I should have declared an interest at the beginning of the meeting, that I'm obviously one of the Torvine nominees to the Bronavon housing. So that's obviously of interest in this, so I should state that. Apologies, I neglected it at the outset. My question, what lessons have been learned from developing Pearl House? You could go on all day, so I'm going to just say, could other buildings, such buildings throughout the borough, be considered for conversion?
I will quote Paula Kennedy, and if Paula's listening to this, apologies Paula, who was the Chief Executive of Mellin Homes. It's a fantastic project, Pearl House. Bringing a building such as that back into use, a listed building, is fantastic. It's fantastic for Pontypool. I would say never again do this in a listed building. The costs have risen drastically over a period of time with other things that have come forward. You can't foresee some of the challenges we've had around there in terms of things that we've uncovered. It has been really, really challenging. I say that tongue-in-cheek in a way. Would we do it again? Yes, we'd have another go at it. But it comes with significant pitfalls and challenges with any old building and any conversion, particularly of office accommodation, into alternative provision. We needed a solution. We needed to do something. It felt right at the time. It's felt right all along. It still feels the right thing to do. I think one of the things I often refer to Pearl House as Plan B. So we did have a Plan A. I have to say, it doesn't feel like Plan B now. It feels like Plan A. It's been a fantastic achievement to get it where it is. There's some absolute huge credit that needs to go to a range of individuals who I won't name and shame here, for fear of repercussions. But there's been a fantastic amount of effort that's gone in here. just to pull this project to where we are. There's a huge amount of work still to do. Again, huge lessons around how we would structure certain things going forward, how we would maybe do things slightly differently in terms of some of the contractual arrangements. But I think where we've got to is an exceptionally positive place. We've got a building that, for those who visited and looked around, is something to be proud of. I certainly look back, and I think one of the comments I made when we were walking around was this used to be my old office in a previous life in Torfaen when I worked here. And it's nice to see it coming back to life and use and have a purpose again. We'd dearly love to do this if there's opportunity in other properties that are around. But what we don't have are the purse strings here, because the housing support grant that we were able to enably juggle over a period of time to make sure it was there for when Pearl House opened, we haven't got that flexibility anymore because the money is fully committed. If there's an injection of cash that comes in around housing support, then of course we'd want to do something similar, or maybe not on the same level or scale, but something very, very similar we'd want to look at, perhaps in the south of the borough.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to leasing. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gaynor James, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just another comment about Pearl House. Besides the accommodation being absolutely amazing and the organisation on it is absolutely fabulous, I just wanted to quote how impressed I was of the saving of the bats. And now that really impressed me what they've done there, and that's an amazing job. So again, another thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. As I was saying, we now move on to Leasing Scheme Wales, which brings us to question 13. Invite back in Councillor David Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. You state here that the Council will assume responsibility for managing properties, tenants, ensuring properties kept in good state of repair, etc. So I suppose I was slightly surprised because this is something that the RSLs normally do, and have we the capacity and capability to manage the scheme in this way?
We have indeed. With Leasing Scheme Wales comes some funding from Welsh Government that's enabled us to recruit an additional officer into our accommodation team. The accommodation team have been there managing our leased accommodation for a number of years, probably as long as almost 20 years, I'd say. So that's well versed. We have contractors in place who undertake our maintenance. We have some grant funding allowance from Welsh Government to cover some of our maintenance liabilities that will be there. And we've got obviously that experience that I've referenced in terms of managing that. We also receive some additional funding towards the support of those residents who are accommodated in the accommodation. So for the local authority, it tied up a number of things that we could do. So while staff support the Leasing Scheme Wales units, they'll also be supporting other leased accommodation and other provision we use across our temporary accommodation portfolio. So it's a double-edged sword here, and we're able to actually supplement some of the existing work that we have, and put some additional capacity into the team so that we can manage services much better, more proactively and effectively.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to question 14, Councillor Linda Clarkson again.
Thank you, Chair. You've already answered the main part of my question. But can I just ask, how long are we anticipating the leasing agreements to be?
The lease agreements in general are around about 5 years. So we look at a 5-year period. The scheme is running until, now I have to do my maths, it's around about 2032 is the commitment for funding from Welsh Government. We have that target that's in the report that we need to meet by the end of March 27, which is 40 units, which is effectively 1% of the private rented sector stock in Torfaen. We're confident of reaching that level, given the level of interest that we have, given the work we're doing. We haven't got a property leased as yet. We've got properties slowly coming over, so the process is quite laborious. There's a lot of checks and balances that are needed. Where we've got one property we're working on at the moment, it's an empty home, so there's a lot of work to be done on it. So that we're waiting for that to be completed, and that's taking the landlord a little bit of time. of coordination of contractors. He's doing some of the work himself, and then we've got to inspect that work before we take the unit on. We're also taking on some ready occupied units where the landlord was considering leaving the market and selling, and would effectively have left 4 individuals homeless, 4 individuals' households homeless. We're stepping in to take those properties over to prevent homelessness. So there's a double edge to this scheme as well. We're not just taking on empty properties, we're taking on properties where there's a risk of somebody losing their home. Equally, we're quite confident, whilst we're not going to get to the target of properties of 10 by the end of March now, we were ambitious, that was, with the timescales that we had. We certainly will reach that level of 40 by the end of 2027, March 27, with the numbers that we've got coming through. Confident that next year we'll certainly be well over that 15 mark that's there, and the funding's committed by Welsh Government for that period.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to question 15, invite Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Chair, I think Simon just answered that, really. Can is there any way you could say, are the targets realistic for future years? And are they sufficiently ambitious or not?
The targets that we've been given by Welsh Government, it's done on that proportional level, Councillor. That's Welsh Government have proportioned it 1% of the available stock at the time at which we signed up to the scheme. And that's the same for every local authority, to have some parity and fairness, so that local authorities were given the opportunity to actually take a proportion of the market. And it was done in a way as to not overly skew the market as well, because whilst the rents we're offering are fixed to the local housing allowance rate, they're not market rates, the level of benefits that landlords receive quite significant, in that there's no risk around the rent, there's no risk around damage to the property, and there's a certain value of repairs done annually to the property, free gratis, if you like. The landlord doesn't have to pay for a value, I think it's up to about £1,200 worth of repairs and works, which is quite significant. So one thing we're keen to do is take on properties that are of a good standard, so we don't have that risk around repairs, because that just means that that repair level can go on to actually keep the properties in a better state going forward. So yeah, I think it's not as ambitious as I would have liked. I think we could go higher, given the level of interest that we've had. So we've got a really, really robust private landlord forum, down to the efforts of staff on the ground in terms of developing that arrangement. We have around about 60 landlords at the last forum that we had, which is far in advance of a lot of other areas at present.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans. Move on to question 16. Back to Councillor David Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I think probably a fairly short and concise response is sufficient here. How do we feel the cost effectiveness of this in relation to other interventions? The fact that it's been grant funded obviously really makes it what it is.
Hugely cost effective for us. If we can get somebody into affordable accommodation and avoid putting them into temporary housing, significant saving for the local authority. Absolutely significant saving for the local authority. I can't underplay the impact that this will have for us.
Right, thank you very much. We'll move on now to temporary accommodation provision, and takes us up to question 17, and invite Councillor Nick Hawler, please.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to 4.5. The provision of temporary accommodation has been relatively consistent over the last 18 months, with numbers averaging about 110 households at any given time, with a vast majority of approximately 75% of these households being single. Simon, my question is, with 75% of these households being single people, what support do you give to families and friends who accommodate those who end up staying within their household?
Sorry, Councillor, are you talking about the support that we offer for those single people who go into that accommodation?
Well, those people that land up having to use their parents, and they can't get into their own accommodation, and they land up being within those friends or households around them. and the provision of actually getting them away from that and getting them into housing.
Okay, so we're really talking about individuals who are probably, for want of a better phrase, hopping between different friends and relatives. Okay.
Sofa surfing.
There's a lot of support out there to actually engage with those individuals to try and get them into accommodation. We do work with individuals to try and explain what the local authority can do to source accommodation. If an individual's in need of support to actually find private rented accommodation, for example, aside leasing scheme Wales, we do offer individuals the opportunity to access our prevention funds that we have. So we can help them to access private rented accommodation through offering rent in advance, cash bonds, help with some of the fees that may be associated with getting into accommodation. We'll also be able to offer support through our Housing Support Gateway to actually enable individuals to access appropriate support to their needs. So if an individual's got maybe some mental health problems or maybe a substance misuse issue, we've got a range of services that can actually support those individuals in the right manner to access the right support at the right time and access alternative services. So there's a lot of support available. The waiting time for support is fairly low as well. If somebody's in crisis, they'll be seen on that day pretty much. We've got that crisis provision. Some of our services do have some waiting lists, but the average time is lasting around about, and Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong here, around about 15 to 20 days, I think, for access to support. So it's not a long waiting list. And we do prioritise those individuals in the greatest level of need. So individuals need not be left alone and suffer. There's that access to that advice and support from a range of agencies that we commission across Toolvine. And all the details can be found on the Council's web pages and on the Home Seeker web pages that we've recently revised and refreshed as well.
Thank you, Simon. Just to go back on this, is there any support for relatives and families that actually do give the support to these people that find themselves on the street? Is there any help for those people that do open the doors to those people?
We do offer help where individuals are able to provide short-term fixes for individuals rather than going into temporary accommodation. We do offer some incentives to help with some of the additional costs that may be incurred. So that's done to actually enable people to stay in a safe environment and a secure environment if that's preferable to that individual. Okay. So that has been done from time to time to avoid particularly where individuals, we're particularly short of accommodation at times and we may be having to look at out-of-county placements, which we don't like doing, but we've had to do and we currently are having to do because of the level of demand that we're seeing. If an individual is able to stay at home and we can negotiate with an excluder, for example, to extend that for a period of time, we will put some facilities and support in to help that happen.
Thank you, Sam. It's good to hear that there is engagement in that area. Thank you.
I was just going to add to that, Councillor Haller, sort of where we've got young people who are struggling within a family context, we do have specific young person services, which does encompass mediation as well to enable them to sustain their accommodation within the family home where it's appropriate and safe to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Move to question 18, and Councillor Linda Clarkson-Barton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the sustainability of the temporary accommodation provision in light of the lack of some of the suitable single persons accommodation we've got available in Toolvine and the pressures that has actually got on that already. We've already got a lot of older people waiting to downsize into more suitable accommodation, which would then free up larger properties. Is there a sort of risk of there being a log jam with the move on from temporary accommodation because of these pressures? And have we actually looked at the impacts on the general waiting list and home seekers?
Okay, it's a really good question around the issue of log jam. I referenced this earlier around Pearl House in terms of we don't want that clogging up. We want people to move through that service when they need to move on. We don't want people waiting in supported housing when they no longer need supported housing. So we've got mechanisms in place to help that. In terms of temporary accommodation, we're faced with that very scenario at the moment. Our numbers that are in this report, when this report was drafted, were right. We're currently running at something like 130 households, 135 households now in temporary accommodation. in Torvine and outside of Torvine, purely because of the lack of move on and the pressures that we're seeing and the demands that are there. It's inevitable that will happen at time to time. We've been able to keep things relatively stable for a period of time. Unfortunately, it's hit a point where that's no longer been a sustainable thing for us to do. So we've had to venture into the use of hotel-type accommodation, which is something I'm really disappointed at, but it's a necessity. We've had no choice. But it's been short-term, and we brought people back where we can as soon as we can. What we're doing with our RSL partners at the moment is we're looking to lease accommodation from them, particularly Bronavon as the largest landlord, so that we're using that accommodation as temporary accommodation. We're also looking at different models to actually move some of that, if we've accommodated somebody on a temporary basis, to move those individuals on into permanent accommodation, but not moving them to an alternative unit, to keep them in that existing unit. So it's almost what we call a temp to perm arrangement. We're also made a revised offer to our private sector landlords. Very recently, after a recent landlords forum, we've put a communication out on social media. I think it's fair to say we've been drowned under the response from private landlords wanting to lease accommodation to us to use as temporary accommodation. Absolutely drowned on the offer that we've made. It actually is more cost effective than the types of accommodation that we're currently using. It will save us 50% of the cost per placement that we have by making this revised offer. And we're confident that we'll have more accommodation there. And the problem we've got is the longer term supply and availability of affordable accommodation to move on. And that comes back to development, finding alternatives. It comes back to some of the points that are in the report around us looking to use social housing grant to actually buy on the open market, the buyback I referenced earlier within Bronavon, and other RSLs that are working in the area. Melin have procured a number of properties, taking every opportunity to increase the supply. And that's keeping the wolf from the door. But I'm afraid at this point, I'd say the wolf's got through the door because we've not been able to sustain that performance we've had in the last few months. We just seem to have seen a spike just after Christmas, and it's been unsustainable for us. We'll see a change when Pearl House becomes effective and when some of the other things start to come to fruition. So we'll see that come back down. But the impact is here and now, and it's a daily struggle for staff to find accommodation for individuals who are coming through, and we're holding the line.
So just to recap, that seems that there's an inevitable impact on the general waiting lists of people who are sitting. They've got a roof over their heads at this point in time, but they sort of might be inappropriate housing that they're living within now and becoming more inappropriate. So it could be heading through crisis in another area where social care has sort of become an issue.
There's a real balance here around the housing register and addressing the homelessness need, because I'm a firm believer that we have to have a proportionate way in which we allocate social housing to avoid exactly that. What we've done over the years is try and keep the number of properties that are coming through for our move-on arrangements at around about the 40% level. We potentially may have to rethink that and increase that quota at this time to actually cater for the demand that we're seeing, to try and create some balance. So we've still got some opportunity for people to move on who are in low to level medium need. Yeah, low level medium need. And those in the higher need, which would be somebody who's homeless or delayed transfer of care or bed blocking in hospital, whatever it may be. So we've got to try and find another balance there. And we're working with RSL partners to do that. And the way the Home Seeker policy is written, it does give us flexibility to do that with our partners. So it's not a hard and fast policy. We've left some fluidity in there for this very scenario. So we thought ahead really in terms of how we've drafted some of these arrangements. It does come back to supply. What I would say is that the Home Seeker list, the actual number registered for housing, is staying constant. Okay, so that's managing. And that's ticking over steadily. So there's no crest of a wave. We're not seeing a huge spike. That's managing there, and that's down to how effective we are at managing the register and how we're managing expectations when people are applying for housing and the advice we're giving up front. The other thing I would say is that we're working very effectively with our RSL partners to get properties through the system as quickly as we can. We have got some delays at the moment because of labour workforce issues and that's causing one or two issues. But we're alive to that situation. We're working with the RSL partners on that, and we're working collaboratively and collectively there, because we're very much, it's very much an open communication channel to try and make sure that we've got people moved on as quickly as we can. Very crudely, our temporary accommodation process is very much like air traffic control. We've got people waiting to come in to temporary accommodation, and we're holding people in very tenuous situations. Maybe they're being evicted by private landlords, and we're negotiating over a longer stay so that we can actually get people into the right accommodation rather than moving them twice. You know, morally, we're trying to do the right thing. It does come with a cost at times, and it also comes with a different skill sets from officers to negotiate. And that's something that officers are learning and we're getting better at, but sometimes we just can't hold the tide. Last time I checked, we're not miracle workers, and we're trying to work miracles here.
Thanks for the answer. Difficult balancing.
Okay, thank you very much. As a borough, have we considered alternative, innovative designs for single-person temporary accommodation, such as you see in other areas with converted, like little container villages? Have we looked at other authorities' approaches to this and learned anything best practice?
We have looked at the models of the converted shipping containers and the pods, the pop-up pods that are there. They do come with some significant risks and management issues. So they're easily highlighted. They do attract certain types of behaviour from experience and from listening to other areas. It can give a viable solution. One of the issues you do have is you still need the land to site those facilities on. They need to have access to utilities. They need to have access to water. The problem we have is access to those sites. Some of the areas, I know Cardiff have had a lot of temporary housing put up on sites that they've put in place and will be movable to an alternative site, but it's sites where they've already got an infrastructure in them. They've already got the utilities there. They've already got the water there. They've got gas and electric available. So it's been easy for them to do that. Well, I wouldn't say easy, that's a derisory really towards what's been achieved, because it's fantastic what they've done. But while the development's been going on, they've been able to accommodate individuals in those short-term homes, which are really fantastic facilities. We really haven't got that luxury because a lot of our sites don't have that infrastructure. So we've had to be innovative in different ways. So a lot of our temporary accommodation provision, we've worked with private landlords to source accommodation. Predominantly now we've got work with some landlords to source, say, 2-bed flats that we're able to offer as shared units, so lower level shared units, which work much better. We're able to match people much better. We're able to manage the risk much better and needs much better. By having those low level units, it's providing better alternatives for individuals in borough and for us to avoid more expensive forms of accommodation. Having said that, we are really, really keen to increase our temporary accommodation portfolio to have independent units of accommodation, because we think that's the right thing to do. We're sustaining the provision at Nether Court, and we're looking to improve certain aspects of Nether Court now with some repairs that we're looking to commission. And that will stay for the near future. But what we're keen to do is increase that overall supply in the private rented sector and through the RSL sector, so we've got better quality accommodation. I'm afraid that things such as the pods and the innovative solutions that are brought forward work more for the inner city authorities where they've got that land available. And it's derelict land that's previously been housing. We haven't got a lot of that, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daniel, come in, please.
Sure. So I would say that a lot of our innovation has been focused on, rather than capacity, it's been around effectiveness of service and having it more tailored. So I'll bring it back to Pearl House. I think that's one example to come back to. That whole project is about delivering that service better. You know, pre-Pearl House, you know, we were delivering a service that was fairly standardised with sort of tailored support through, you know, Woolwich and I think it was Cornerstone before. Cornerstone? Yeah, Cornerstone before. And this This new project provides more tailored support to supported living for those individuals that are going in it, meaning that they're more likely to get back on their feet. And for some individuals, our previous way of working just didn't work. So I would say, rather than innovation in terms of just delivering sheer units, sheer numbers, I think our focus has to be around delivering innovation that actually provides more sustainable and more effective outcomes for tailored cohorts, tailored people. So I think that's where our innovation is probably best focused.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a question on housing first now. Increased supported housing. Councillor Linda Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've actually covered this in some of the other questioning, so I'm just going to take that question out, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much. So there's a question on housing first, and I invite Councillor Steve Evans in, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's in section 4.8. The scheme in Torfaen has been operating for approximately 3 years with varying successes. The question I'm going to ask is, in what ways has success varied, and what have been the causes and the challenges?
Okay, housing first as a principle is exactly what it says on the tin. It's the housing comes first, you put the person into the property and you wrap the support around them. That is the, if you like, that's the true definitive definition of housing first. We tried to do that first off in Torfaen. So there's a number of examples where we got the property that the person wanted, effectively in an area they wanted, put them into the property, tried wrapping the support around them as they went in there and as it went on. We found that it just didn't work. We found that for the individuals we were supporting at the time, the level of need that they had, the complexity that they had, the difficulties that they had, and the way in which we'd approached it was potentially wrong. We needed to have a more meaningful relationship with individuals first. So what we've done, we've turned housing first into almost what I would very crudely call housing second. It's a blend of the housing first principles in terms of putting individuals into accommodation, but it's very much about working with that individual to build that relationship firstly. It's not necessarily about putting them into that independent accommodation first and foremost, but having an open dialogue about what we're trying to attain and what we're trying to move towards. So we've worked with individuals now on a more structured manner, that we've almost dovetailed services into some of our supported housing schemes, where individuals who've gone on to move into accommodation with our Housing First project, because that's what we're still calling it, they've gone in and had a duality of support. So they've been supported within the supported housing scheme, but also by the Housing First worker, who's wrapped support around them. And that, in essence, with a story that's attached into the report around Jeremy, that's what happened in Jeremy's instance, that there was an element of support that was twin-tracked, if you like, that individuals receive support within a supported housing setting or a semi-supported housing setting, pardon me, and then that support from Housing First wrapped around the individual. What we were finding is that tenancies in the first instances were failing, and they weren't successful. I have to say, we were a little bit too brave as well. Some of the individuals we supported in the first instances were extremely challenging and difficult. And it was perhaps not the individuals to maybe cut our first teeth on. What we found is that some of the individuals we work with now, we've been able to get them from a very difficult place into accommodation, work with them effectively, and then start to breach that question about, well, would you like to do this? We think you're ready to do this. We think this is where you could go to. What do you think about that? And those conversations are about engagement and about how individuals build that rapport and relationship with somebody. And the workers have been fantastic. I can't sing their praises enough. They've actually, individuals such as Jeremy there and others that we've had, have been entrenched in a rough sleeping lifestyle, fairly much on and off for a number of years. And we've turned that around. We've turned that to a point at which individuals have sustained accommodation for quite a period of time now. So I think it's fair to say we've learned. that Housing First wasn't quite right for the individuals we were working with. It may be right for somebody who comes through, but we're adopting the core principles within how we're approaching it, but we're adopting it in a much more, I would say, a much more balanced manner. We're not just saying this is what we've got to do, which is what we felt we had to do when we cut our teeth on the first instances here. So we've pared it back, learned from it, and adapted it to meet the needs of those individuals who are presenting to us. And we've really reaped the rewards in the examples that we've got there. And it's really nice. That's a really nice story that's out there in the public domain, and it shows the real impact. Because the cost then to the public purse, the wider public purse, around individuals that are rough sleeping, on health, community safety, on the police, probation and other areas, it's there to see. But housing, I have to say, Housing First is a housing funded approach. I would say that it should need wider public funds, and that's something we need to crack going forward.
Yeah, I was just going to add into that as well, Simon. I think some of the lessons that we've learned along the way are around strengthening the partnerships and the arrangements to wrap support around those individuals. And that's been a journey that we've gone on as a team and progressed in a robust infrastructure to enable that strength of partnership, those honest conversations, working with complexity and embracing the challenge of working with individuals who, to be quite honest, have been let down by the systems time and time again. It's been an interesting journey, it's been a valuable journey, whilst in some way we're not adhering completely to the purist Housing First principles. What we've been able to do was make it work for us in Torfaen, which has been really important.
Okay, Councillor Daniels, please.
Brief, sorry. The principle of Housing First is an admirable one, I think. But as Simon and Rachel just explained, I think that the tailored approach that we're trying to take, I think, is the right approach, because I think that, you know, it's so obvious that people come to us in sort of completely different places, completely different stages of need. So the more that we can cater directly to that, the better, and the less standardised, the better. I'd call back to something you said earlier, Simon, around the approach of getting properties from Bronavon, Melyn, Pobble, on a temporary basis and then converting those to a permanent tenancy. I think that's a really, really good approach, and I think that's a real good example of pragmatic Housing First, because that gives that opportunity to kind of, rather than throwing them into the deep end and put them straight into permanent accommodations, it gives them the opportunity to kind of get used to this property, sort of see how they manage sort of baby steps, and then at the point that they're ready, then they can take over, assume the tenancy of that place that they've come to call home. So I think it's a really good approach, and I think I just wanted to highlight the innovative thinking and really credit Simon and the team for thinking in that way.
Okay, thank you very much. You can see Councillor Thomas got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's only a quick one, and it's only because Councillor Daniels has just mentioned Bronavon. I was just wondering if Councillor Daniels knew any more about what was happening in Llanraban for the accommodation there.
Yeah, funnily enough, I had, just before I came to this, I was in the corridor having a briefing with Bronavon around that particular subject. So Bronavon, Llanraban Court, they are going to be looking at that for independent living. So, you know, we've got a range of independent living sheltered complexes up and down the borough that Bronavon own, which are in varying levels of, you know, quality. Some of them really need updating. I think that they really want to make this a flagship example of the type of sheltered accommodation that they wish to provide going forward. So I think they're a little way off actually starting on that project, but I think the briefing that I had in the hallway, which unfortunately was much more rushed than I'd hoped, was aimed to kind of detail, put more flesh on the bones to that. So it's a really encouraging project, I think, and it'll hopefully provide a more kind of optimistic and sustainable future for people living in communal facilities like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great, that is, Councillor Towns. I just wanted to make sure it was still going ahead, that was all.
Oh yeah, very much so, and I'm certainly keeping the heat on them in that particular respect, because it's what they're articulating is very exciting.
Okay, thank you very much. Early intervention and prevention, or EIP as it's known. I believe that community action is best placed most of the time to help local people manage crises in their well-being. How confident are we that appropriate community support is available and sufficient? Have we mapped out provision, please?
Okay. There's been an exceptionally large amount of work done in this area to look at provision across the borough as a whole. Looking at where that provision is funded from, what's delivered within communities as well in terms of the different services and what that brings, looking at some of the statutory provision that we have and what the impact is in terms of what we can change. One of the things I would say is that early intervention and prevention and the principles of early intervention and prevention is really to actually get in early, to work with individuals so that we can actually resolve the issue that they have and make sure that they're then able to be more resilient to deal with other issues that may well then arise. So what I would say is that if we turn away from early intervention and prevention, and you look at the core principles of housing support and housing support grant, the way in which housing support and housing support grant works is on the basis of actually creating independence, exactly what early intervention and prevention is aiming to do. And it's aimed to create that resilience within an individual so that they're able to better cope with things that actually go bump. Housing Support Grant has done that for years, or Supporting People programme, as it was done for years, is to actually support people into that independent place. What we've done in terms of a council, and this is a wider project than just housing, so I'm sat on the fringes of this, is very much map those services that are out there, look at what we're tangibly doing, and look at where we've got overlap and duplication in some service provision that we're potentially commissioning. So what the model has done is actually worked back and looked at what the core aims and objectives are, looked at what we need to focus on. Prime example here comes around, and you look at financial inclusion and financial advice work that's out in the community. There's a number of agencies that are delivering that work, commissioned through different funding streams, CCG, HSG, maybe other funding streams that are coming in maybe to organisations there. They potentially could be working with the same individuals. And what the programme's about is actually trying to coordinate that journey and understand where individuals have gone, what the outcomes have been and attained, and understand whether they're then coming back into the system and services that are there. Added to that, what the hope is that those individuals then become that more resilient and that they're able to then cope with those issues that then arise again in the future, or know where to go if the community have got services and we're building community capacity in terms of that provision with services that are out there. The other thing that the system will do is hopefully, and it should do if it works in the manner that it's intended, is reduce the reliance on some statutory service provision. So it could well result in reductions in the level of homelessness, could result in the number of individuals seeking assistance through social care because there's interventions out there in the community that have delivered real outcomes. Could well be that those targeted preventions that are around employability, accessing employment, accessing economic inactivity, and the services there, sports activity as well is drawn into that, is how that then works to create more sustainable solutions for individuals going forward and helps them then in terms of settling into community. Now, in terms of the programme that's it's still early days, there's a piece of work that's been ongoing for quite some time that I'm sure as councillors you're aware of in terms of the EIP programme. There's a lot of activity going on in terms of recruitment into different roles now. What we do have is the role within housing here, and housing sits outside of the EIP agenda and is somebody, an organisation that, in terms of organisation, that will be feeding into EIP. But the work in which that we'll be doing and working with will be alongside the hub that will coordinate the activity. and the commissioning activity as well, because those grants that are coming into the local authority, currently commissioned by about 4 or 5 different teams and services. The commissioning activity will be under one helm, one umbrella, so we'll be able to look at best use of that funding going forward and how we can make that go further in terms of provision that we have. So a blended approach in terms of using housing support grant, SPF funding, CCG funding, to actually meet the needs, so we get better outcomes for residents of Torfaen. It is hugely ambitious. It is different. I don't think there's any local authority that has done something like this, certainly in Wales. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. It will take time to bed in, that's one thing I would say. So the impact of that will take time to evidence and show. But the appetite is there for that change. It's how we now deliver that on the ground with the resources that we have and how we make those impacts. But there's a real opportunity to make a difference. And it definitely links to the work that we've done in housing, particularly as we point to Pearl House and the remit of Pearl House in terms of that partnership working. For those who attended the session that we visited Pearl House on the ground floor of the office, is very much about that joint working space, that connectivity, that making sure that we've got people at the right place, the right time, with it, and getting the right outcome that they want. The most important thing is listening to what people want when they come in to see us. And it's that conversation.
Okay, yes, thank you. Very good answer. Councillor Daniels? Yeah.
So just to add to that, really, I think this is where health, I think, need to be a bigger part of the conversation, because I think housing, the elephant in the room there is mental health, isn't it, really? Because it plays a massive part in how you sustain your tenancy, your mortgage, just about your job, which pays for both of those, tenancy and mortgage. So I think there needs to be a much wider conversation, I think, around early intervention. I mean, it's preventing people from getting, it's catching people at that low-level mental health end of things, which at the moment, the state of mental health services is pretty damn poor. And I think there's a lot of people who are, there's lots of problems building up that with earlier intervention, a more effective early intervention probably could have been mitigated or prevented. So I think that health needs to be a much bigger part of the conversation, and need to realise that housing isn't just housing in isolation. Housing is everything. From my perspective, that's a point that I will impress in every forum that I've got. But it's a message, I think, that really needs to be heard loud and clear.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Move on to question 23, and Councillor Linda Clarkson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hoping this will be another short and sweet one, because it's me and my thirst for knowing more. We're talking about the restriction of the service presently ongoing, and we're aware of what a fundamental shift there is. So you're talking about it evolving over the course of the next year. Do you think in 12 months we'll have evidence to bring back to scrutiny, or information that you could bring back that we could start evaluating and scrutinising this change?
I would hope so. I would hope we'd be able to see some evidence that there's been a shift. We'd certainly be able to see some impact. But I do think with any change that you make, and this is quite a significant change, we have to add, quite a significant change, I think you have to have a period of time of maybe 6 months to settle and actually develop the systems and the processes and get the workings and the mechanics right. You'll have 6 months of actually working with that system, and then you'll have a period of time to potentially review it. 12 months may well give us some indication as to where we are. I'd say 18 months would be a better judge, because I think the first 6 months is very much about getting things stabilised, getting everybody working to a structure and a method, first and foremost, and to iron out some of those creases that are inevitably going to be there. So 12 to 18 months, I'd be more inclined to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to question 24, which is a question on move-on arrangements. Invite Councillor Nick Hawler, please.
Thank you, Chair. Proactive practice is now embedded within the service provisions for moving people from supported housing and temporary accommodation. Is there a prioritisations process in place to house people? For example, are those in temporary accommodation or supported housing prioritised over those that may be permanent accommodation, although the accommodation is not suitable for their needs? Thank you.
Okay, so first and foremost, the move-on process sits outside of the General Home Seeker Scheme. So individuals are still able to, if they're in temporary accommodation or supported housing, still apply for the vacancies advertised through Home Seeker, but they're also placed onto a move-on list, or register, call it what you will, where we actively and proactively work with individuals around their resettlement, and we do take out a proportion of properties for that move-on arrangement. So in answer to that, yes, there is some additional priority and preference given. The move-on register is very much worked on a date order, so the date on which you go onto the move-on register is the date on which you'll appear on that list. We do at times, and we will do, accelerate somebody up where we need to move them more speedily. So for example, if we've got somebody in Hales House, or one of, well, let's just say Hales House, they've got employment, they've just got employment after being unemployed for a period of time, the rents in Hales House are quite high. It's not going to be sustainable or feasible to keep them there, and they don't need the support if they're working. If they've got employment, we can actually work towards them being moved on into alternative accommodation. So we will potentially accelerate that individual for the next suitable vacancy for them. We'd be then making the best use of the supported housing that we have. So we do have a prioritisation framework that's there, but we do override it as well because of strategic need. The other thing we would have is we may have somebody who's coming into us and we'd look and we'd say, crikey, their needs, we'd need them in some permanent supported accommodation. We'd move somebody from supported accommodation to an alternative provision to actually generate that vacancy. It's how we'd strategically manage homelessness, housing need, and the demand and pressures that we've got. What I would say is that this process is there. The 40% level that we have, as I mentioned earlier, is within the policy that we operate. It's something that gives us some fluidity to actually increase that if we need it, if we saw demand rise or change, and also drop as well, if we saw things materially change the other way. What we don't want to do is move people too quickly into accommodation when they don't need to be moving from supported housing. We're trying to make sure that we're moving them at the right time, at the right pace, with the right support wrapped around them and the right package. What we've developed is a really trusting relationship with our providers in supported housing around the work that they do with individuals around resettlement. But when individuals are moving on, what we've got is that link then with our housing intervention team, and I can't sing their praises enough. You know, the data that's in there in the report speaks volumes in terms of the number of individuals who've been resettled into housing and have not failed in the first 12 months of their tenancy. That figure was significantly higher when we were leaving things, I wouldn't say to chance, but leaving things to choice through the Home Seeker Scheme, because people were actually going to the wrong accommodation. And it was through their own choice, but it was still the wrong accommodation. So what we're able to do is actually help people make informed choices and decisions about their housing journey. And that's proved vital. And the feedback we've had from the public in terms of those who've been resettled has been phenomenal. We've had some real great feedback around the work that that team have done.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to question 25. It's a question for Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on item 4.10. This is helping to reduce repeat homelessness and meet the aspirations of Welsh Government in making homelessness rare, brief, and when it does occur, and unrepeated. The question I've got is, how successful are our provisions and support services in reducing the repeated homeless presentation, you know, people who present themselves?
I think in terms of that particular service there, in terms of the housing intervention service, massively so. The figures there, with only one individual losing accommodation in 12 months, it is fantastic. You're talking about around about 120 individuals, I think, were housed in that period. And that's a phenomenal return, because that figure, when we look at general needs accommodation and the home seeker process, is potentially much higher than that. We're getting some data together, and I'll be happy to share that with you as a scrutiny committee. It's one of the measures we're trying to bottom out and find out more details from our RSL partners as well there. But the work that they do just doesn't go to the housing associations as well. If we resettle somebody into a private tenancy, we follow up with the agent and the private landlord. We're not leaving those individuals high and dry. We're continuing to follow them through. And that, for us, is critical. That light touch can actually reap huge benefits in unpicking those issues. In terms of general support services, though, Councillor, I'd say that the effectiveness of our housing support grant programme is huge. Our numbers in terms of homeless presentations is relatively static in recent years, and that's a testament to the work that's done by our support providers and how we've structured that support and how we've been intervening early and how we've been addressing some of those early needs. So they've not even touched the homelessness door. When we've been able to avert that, we've done that, and we've done that before the 56 days has kicked in legislation. That's becoming more challenging now because of all those pressures I spoke about earlier and that was raised. But we continue to do that. We continue to make those inroads. So in terms of the effectiveness of support, yes, hugely effective in terms of reaching that objective. We are still faced with repeat presentations, but they are from individuals who are significantly more complex. Out in the community, have got significant challenges, and we really struggle with some of those behaviours that they exhibit. But for those individuals who've hit crisis, come through, and we've been able to work with proactively, we're not seeing them again. So we are making inroads into that target and that ambition from Welsh Government.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question now on website changes and service information. Councillor David Williams, please.
Yes, and again, it only needs to be quite short. In doing this, we sought feedback from service users to find out that it is effective and that they can navigate it okay.
I'll be very confident and say we have had feedback. I will look over to Rhiannon, who's sat by me here. She's smiling there because Rhiannon's done a lot of the work to pull this together from the numerous feeds that we had. And I think the feedback we've had from particularly young people with the communications that we've been sending out has been really positive. We've recently made a publication for young people about setting up their own home for the first time, launched that at CCYP, I think it was, and the feedback we've had from young people there was fantastic. We've also done some other research in the past with Shelter Cymru's Take Notice project about how we configure services and advice, and we have sort of embodied some of that in terms of what we've been doing and delivering. But I think, yes, we have had feedback. Will we continue to adapt and evolve? Yes, we will. Will we take opportunities to take feedback on board, whether it's positive, negative? We'll do that. We've really wanted to hone down to some key areas, though, in terms of that advice provision, and that's what we've been able to do, and it's a testament to the work that Rhiannon's done in terms of pulling us together and keeping us on track, really. So a fantastic job there. I have to give credit to individuals across the board because we've all contributed to that. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make things more accessible for the public and create tailored advice solutions that people can access whenever they want now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. A question on temporary to permanent housing. This has been completed on 2 occasions and is to be rolled out further over the course of the next financial year and in line with how the Council is seeking to change the provision of temporary accommodation. Were there any challenges in delivering this pilot? If so, what were they? And are there any downsides to this approach, please?
Challenges around the pilot. I think the very first case I've retained a heavy involvement in because this was one that we were we were left with what I would call a hospital pass by an agency, and the young person involved would not have coped moving straight into independent accommodation, would not have coped going into supported housing, would not have coped going into temporary accommodation. So we took the move to actually work with Bronavon on this occasion to put the person in with dual support. So we had support going in through our temporary accommodation team and also through a support provider and also maintained through another agency as well. So we almost had a tripartite arrangement going on. The level of intensity that we had to put in there was quite a lot. There was a lot of staff activity in supporting that individual. That was probably to the detriment of one or two other things that we had to maybe drop. And it meant that individuals did create a level of dependency on the level of support that was put in at that point. So that when we started to ease away, we actually found it difficult, or the individual found it difficult to let go. So we've learned not to, I think one thing we've learned, a lesson learned there, is not to create that level of dependency, to try and keep that as light as we can. But it was through sheer concern of that individual's presentation to us and their level of need. What I would say is that individual's now been there for over 2 years and is thriving as a tenant. And the other example was a bit more straightforward. The second one, we'd learnt a lot. We put the property in an area that was perhaps more suited to that individual and their needs, close to family support as well, that meant that we could step away much easier. And we didn't have to put that level of intensity in. So we've learned a lot there. I would say that this is something that I think going forward we're going to have to do for some of the individuals that we're going to be working with who've got that higher level support need, that I wouldn't be really comfortable putting them into a support environment or in some of the other temporary accommodation that we have, that we'd have to look at an independent unit, work through with a multi-agency approach, and that's what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is make sure agencies are coming to the table and supporting us as much as the individual, so we're getting the right outcome. And then we'll be able to make, hopefully, that individual settle into that community much better.
Okay. Thank you very much, Simon. We've got a question now on increased housing supply. I invite Councillor David Williams for that one, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the SHG spend. Simple question, really, is the balance remaining, 300,000 or so, able to be rolled over, or do you expect to spend it by the end of the year? I know that was earmarked.
It's a really, really difficult one there. We've struggled in recent years to spend the full allocation of social housing grant. What we've got here is we've got a committed spend this year of 12.7 million. It's fairly close to the books there, which is pretty good going. To be honest, there's some authorities that would have underspent by much more. This is predicated on schemes actually coming through, so there could be some slippage on that. There could be some issues around the site and some other things that we are unforeseen. What I would say is that at this point we haven't got any commitments to use that underspend. That will go into the overall underspend for other authorities to mop up if they've got gaps in their programme. We've done really well to get to that position, Councillor, if truth be told, in terms of what land availability we've got and the developments we have. RSLs have done really well. I have to credit them here on the approach they've taken, particularly around buying properties on the open market and bringing them back in. They've been really proactive in that arena. And that's really been a godsend for us in terms of tackling some of the real issues we've had.
Okay, great, thank you very much. We move on now to question 30, which is, you'd be glad to hear, the last question of the evening, for working your socks off. Homeless prevention remains possible, but the overall success in preventing homelessness, where there is a risk of homelessness arising, is reducing. Do we project this will continue to be the case?
I can give you a very quick answer, and it is yes. And one of the things that this comes back to is very much around the affordability of alternative accommodation options. So as you can imagine, if somebody presents to us today and they're losing a private rented tenancy and the landlord's selling up and leaving the market, There's not much private rented accommodation out there. Private rented accommodation out there that's available is expensive and is probably not going to be in the financial envelope of the individuals who are presenting to us. The chances of us finding an affordable solution for them are extremely limited. And that's one of the key drivers for us, is that the affordable alternative options to social housing are not there. The level of social housing we've got is not there to meet demand. So there's not enough accommodation in the system. The successes we do have are around where we're able to negotiate to stave off evictions, where we're able to prevent that, whether it be a mortgage property, whether it be a landlord seeking an eviction of a tenant who's got rent arrears, whether that be in the private or public sector, or mediation around where families have got disputes and we're looking to keep a young person at home, as Rachel referenced earlier. Family mediation scheme have great success in keeping people at home, young people at home with family, and negotiating there. That's getting harder and harder. The pure fact of the matter comes back to simple economics. We haven't got the availability of accommodation that's going to be affordable and sustainable for people. And that is the critical issue for us. We need more affordable housing. The issue we then have is the land issue, the availability of land, the difficulties in developing at the pace that's needed. So we've got to look at those innovative methods. So Leasing Scheme Wales give us some solutions and some options. We'll be using that. We'll be using other tools that are there. We've got flexibility in our approach around prevention fund uses, where we will be using it to potentially pay rent in advance for longer periods of time. We're considering looking at going at the council, potentially looking at being a guarantor for individuals seeking accommodation, which we don't presently do. And it comes with some inherent risks. But those risks may be more palatable than the costs we're incurring, financial costs, but also the costs on individuals having to go through the homeless system and the impact that that has on their well-being. So we've got to look at that and balance that in terms of what we're prepared to do. So that may well be something that we're looking at going forward in terms of changing our approach. Could that actually improve performance? It may do. The difficulty we've got is the level of affordable accommodation out there, and this is why critically the work we're doing with our private rented sector at the moment in terms of engaging with our landlords, I'm really pleased with the effort that we've made in the team in terms of engaging with the private rented sector. For us to have a private sector landlords forum that has 60 landlords attending with regularity now, quarter in, quarter out, it helps that we put on a couple of sausage rolls and sandwiches. That softens it a little bit. But the engagement we've got there is fantastic. They're really welcoming of the speakers we bring in. We're bringing in speakers that are materially beneficial for them. So we're bringing in solicitors to advise them around court process, financial advisors. We're bringing in National Landlord Association. And the feedback we've had from the National Landlord Association is that it's the best attended landlords forum in Wales. And for little old Torvine, we're punching way above our weight for the level of stock that we have. That's really, really good. And that shows how effective we are at making those communications and connections. And the work that's been done, not just by ourselves in terms of the housing team, but also by the Wallich who's been supporting us with that. It's been a fantastic partnership.
Thank you very much. Simon, you sat there and spoke for nearly 2 hours there. With some fantastic answers. Your knowledge is second to none. Thank you very, very much. And yourself, Rachel, and Councillor Daniels, and our two young ladies, who obviously would have learned quite a lot in that 2 hours, without any shadow of a doubt. I don't know if any of the three of you would like to summarise any comments before I then have to invite you to leave the meeting, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you all as members for the insightful questions that you've given today. You've certainly put me through my paces. I think I've earned my pay today. I think what I would say is that the efforts that are here in terms of the report that we've made, I would stress that we've got an absolutely fantastic housing team. We've got a team there that are second to none. They have got some fantastic ideas, some fantastic innovative ways of working. They're making some huge inroads into some very challenging, difficult situations under immense pressure. And the stuff that they're seeing day to day, the difficulties that people are faced with in terms of sustaining accommodation and the difficulties individuals have, it's a testament that they keep coming back day in, day out, week in, week out, and deliver the services to the level that they have and make the service work and work effectively. I have to say, and you probably would say, I would say this, they are the best housing team that I've worked with. Certainly the best housing team in Wales as I see it in terms of what we're doing and delivering and the innovation that we've got and the way in which we're making that difference. I think others would look at us quite enviously from other boroughs in terms of what we're doing. Certainly when I talk to them about Pearl House, their eyes glaze over and they look at that quite fondly and could we have one of those? Well, they could, but they'd have to have the housing team behind to actually get that up and running, I feel. And that's a testament to Rachel's team in terms of the HSG grant team and the commissioning team, and Leslie's team. Unfortunately, Leslie can't be here today because she's ill. The work that they do is absolutely phenomenal as well. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And just before we go, I see a raised hand there, Councillor Hawler.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, thank you, Simon, and your team for such a wonderful, comprehensive replies this afternoon. And I'd like to reiterate, thank you for the visit that we had, that was mentioned earlier from Councillor James, about Pearl House. That was exemplary, that visit. It highlighted what good work that your organisation is doing for that sector. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. All that remains for me to do is to invite you to leave the meeting, please. Right, okay. Thank you very much. Members, can I please remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. Can I refer you now to the scrutiny activity and invite you to offer your recommendations? So I will now hand over to Rebecca, who will formulate the recommendations with us members.
Thank you, Chair. So just quickly to remind you of the scrutiny activities for today. The Adult and Community Zoners Committee are invited to assess whether the issues outlined in the report reflect the local issues that are being brought forward by your constituents, determine whether the steps being taken by the Council and partners will address the housing crisis, and then to offer your recommendations to the Executive Member for Adults and Housing on areas for further development and focus. So if I can open it up to members to offer your recommendations, please.
Yes, Councillor Steve Evans, please.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I'm going to leave in a couple of minutes. What I'd like to see is some future updates from a lot of the information that was given by Simon, which was excellent. Just to see where we are with this new project from Pearl House. That's the first bit. And the other part is, like Councillor D. Williams brought up, what will happen to the 300,000, how it's been used, and that sort of thing. Financially, would it be used?
If I can just come in there quickly, Councillor Evans, so thank you for that. I will note with regards to the future updates, but obviously that's within your gift as the committee to request that back and have that perhaps as an item when you undertake visioning. So I'll make sure to keep that as a focus on your vision impact when you receive that for next year. In terms of the 300,000, did you have a specific recommendation with regards to that? Anything further on from the response that Councillor Williams was given, or? just
I-
a
I- mo-
note of concern?
Just a note of, he did say about some slippage. Is that going to be an accurate figure, going further along the line? Because that's 300,000, maybe down 150,000, maybe 100,000. We're not going to know that, so.
I think it's fair to say, I think it's more likely to be that it might be a bit more if schemes don't manage to come through as expected. So I think what Simon was saying is it's 300,000, but it might go to 400,000 depending on. I think essentially we know that the SHG is ring fenced for housing need, and I guess maybe there's a question there about sort of understanding how the SHG is reallocated and whether there's any investment that comes in regionally through that. That would be my suggestion.
Well, perhaps if I put that on the action sheet rather as a recommendation for you to have a briefing note perhaps at the end of the financial year as to the final outcome of that spend. Would that be okay with members?
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And well worded, David.
Thank you.
I'll leave the meeting now. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I made a note that sort of, the thing about the private and affordable housing coming to market, etc. Again, I think it would be helpful to have an update as to how that's progressing. They were talking about 20 units being brought in via SHG. I think, again, it's not a recommendation, it's more a briefing to keep us updated. Does that sound okay? Then there was also the bit about the Strategic Housing Partnership, which was at question 6. I think it was actually sort of, perhaps we could have a bit more of an update in terms of this was also from Councillor Clarkson, some of the regional work, again, maybe a briefing note as to how some of that is progressing. It's difficult to know about a recommendation as such, but
If I can come in real quickly, I did mark that down as a potential recommendation because the executive member did mention about he is having conversations with regards to perhaps looking at an alternative model. So whether you wanted to make a recommendation about continuing to pursue those conversations, would that be something? Yeah.
Sorry, I think yes, sort of, it's welcome, but we would welcome update on new initiatives and that those are fully pursued on the lines that have been suggested or something like that. Yeah. I think there was a note, because it was helpful to have that clarification, that the affordable housing focus, it does have this Torvine connection. I think that's important, useful for the committee to note.
Yeah, I'll pop that in the commentary then, yeah.
And I think it probably relates a little. There's also the bit about the work plan being monitored. I think Simon was saying he was happy to bring the work plan to scrutiny. So I think that'd be a recommendation that we receive the work plan as convenient. Does that sound okay?
Well, it was an offer, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's difficult with that because obviously you're making recommendations to the executive or the officer. That is entirely within your gift as a committee to request that. So what I do, I'd rather make a note of that and again keep that on the work programme for you and raise that at visioning so that you all have a list of priorities that have been raised from previous committees.
Maybe there's an opportunity here to make a recommendation that once such work plan is available, consideration of a members' seminar, because I think all members would find that helpful.
I did have just one action point as well, Chair. There was, with regards to the repeat homelessness presentations, and they said they were gathering together some more data on that. So I didn't know whether on the action sheet you wanted to ask for that when that's available, because he did say that he was putting together more detailed data on the repeat homelessness presentations. There was also potentially, you may potentially want to consider something along the lines of a recommendation that the exec member did bring up about the health board being a bigger part of the conversation with regards to community activity and work, and they were mapping out the services that are available. I didn't know if you wanted to consider anything along that.
I think, yeah, maybe a recommendation that sort of mapping of support and prevention services should be extended to include health board colleagues, or sort of the health board as well, something on those lines. The other one I was thinking was at number 12, when he said about buildings for conversion, perhaps we could have a recommendation that we were impressed with what had been done at Pearl House, and we would recommend that if there are further opportunities for conversion works in other parts of the borough, they should be explored. Is that fair enough? He did suggest that they might look for somewhere in the south. At 17, I think the provision of temporary accommodation, etc. The thing that, which was, I was Councillor Horler's question, I think maybe there's something about taking forward actions to further publicise the advice and support that's available, perhaps through targeted interventions, thinking like the Young Persons Forum, etc. Because with all due respect, I doubt people will just browse for it on the council website. And the only other one was perhaps that I picked up on was because he said how they flexed housing first. So maybe there's something about how we noted that, and we supported the flexible approach that was taken, but it would be helpful to have updates as to how this is being progressed. And again, that goes to the forward look thing, really, isn't it? And then I think the last bit was the which I think was going to be the bit, but there was a bit about restructure of services, wasn't there? And the suggestion was 18 months hence. So I think, we'd like to note that we feel it would be good to come back and probably that time frame. Is that okay?
Yeah, I only had that one as well, which I've already gone through, Chair, so
Okay.
that's it, thank you.
Is that okay? Nick, sorry,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm listening carefully. I seem to be the only one in the ether at the moment. So, I'm more than happy with your comments, Dave. To be quite frank, I found this quite difficult to actually raise any concerns because it seems to be going in a positive and the right way.
Okay, yeah, lovely, thank you. So that moves us on to agenda item 6, which is item for next meeting. Rebecca, could you please present the report to the members, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to quickly run through this report, this is where you consider the item for your next and what will be the final meeting of this scrutiny year for this committee. So as you will see, as always, set out in the appendix is the basket of items that you selected during your visioning exercise, and then the executive forward plan for the committee and any potential referrals. So there was one item listed in the exec forward plan, which is around placemaking. Now, you did consider placemaking plans within visioning, but that was selected as a reserve item. And then there have been no relevant referrals from audit committee for this committee in this time period. So as you will see from the basket of items that you selected when doing your work programming exercise, you selected demand and flow through the system, adult services. You also reviewed that, if you remember at the last meeting where you took a mid-term review of the work programme, and were satisfied that that was an item that you still wish to prioritise. So if everyone's okay with that,
We're happy?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's fine, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then that takes us on to agenda item 7, which is the date of the next meeting. And the next meeting will be on Thursday, the 3rd of April at 10 a.m. Right, so I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and their contributions.
Thank you, guys.
All that's left for me to do is close the meeting and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much all.
Yeah.